Hello, friends. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Improv and Magic podcast. I'm LD Madera, and my friends, we have got a big show for you today. This is incredible, and I'm still in a little bit of shock over this, but I am very excited to share that today's guest is none other than Brad Sherwood. That's right, the Brad Sherwood. Of course, you all know Brad from the Emmy-nominated show Whose Line Is It Anyway, where he performed for over 18 seasons as a regular. He is truly one of the greatest living American improvisers, at least that's what it says on his website, and has also many other television credits like The Drew Carey Show, Talk Soup, The Newz, Improv-a-ganza, VH1's I Love the 80s and 90s, and The Tonight Show. Brad also tours comedy clubs around the U.S. with his Fast and Furious comedy show, and has also been touring with fellow Whose Line member Colin Mochrie in a live two-man improv show. I still can't believe I had the chance to talk to this man. If you're a fan of Whose Line, you've definitely seen this guy before. Brad was so cool to talk to. He was very open and had a lot of great things to share. My friends, I hope you enjoy this episode. This really meant a lot to me, and I hope it means a lot to you too. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with the one and only Brad Sherwood. My friends, I am extremely excited to welcome here on the Improv and Magic podcast, the man himself, Mr. Brad Sherwood. Hello, Brad. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. And LD, let me just say, you are so lucky to have me.
Understatement of the year. This worked out great because I understand you have a little bit of downtime right now.
Yes, I have a few weeks off from our regular tour that I do with Colin Mochrie. And so, spending some time, quality time with my wife and my dogs.
How do you often spend your downtime, out of curiosity?
It depends. My wife and I like to, fix things up around our house, or if we're trying to do a big change or redecorate something, or I've got things I have to fix and have handymen come in to do the things I have tried to fix and fix those things or what have you. So, I do that kind of boring husbandry. But we sometimes, when we have a big chunk of downtime, we'll go travel and stuff like that. But we love spending time with our dogs. We opted out of having children, so dogs are our children of choice.
A lot of people can relate to that. What are your dogs' names?
I can't tell you because they're very prone to being kidnapped. And there are so many people in my neighborhood that would love to steal my beautiful dogs. We have French bulldogs. And so we just don't let their names out anymore. You could probably find it online, but, I don't want all of your listeners in Vegas to wander by my house and stand just next to my fence and start calling my dogs and then taking them from me. So it's very top security.
We will keep your dogs nameless then for their protection.
When they pass, I will get back on the show and tell you what their names were. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Hopefully that will be in a very long time. Long time. Are you someone who takes full advantage of downtime, or are you someone who just constantly needs to be doing something, whether it's a show, whether it's writing?
I don't need to be constantly doing something. I would say I have a certain lazy gene that I think innately most improvisers have. It's like, hey, the perfect job where you don't have to do anything to prepare other than your entire lifetime having done it. You just walk on stage and then you're doing your gig, which appeals to me a lot. But I think I could be way more motivated. Irons in the fire. I also do music and I paint, but then when I'm off the road, I don't spend a whole lot of time sometimes doing those. I just decompress and, act like my life on the road is so exhausting that I just need to recover. My wife looks at me like, you could be doing some other side projects.
Well, I'm excited to get to know more about you, Brad. So, why don't we start with where did you grow up and what was growing up like for you?
Uh, I grew up, I was born in the Chicago area, lived there till I was 10. And my mother, who is an artist, wanted to move somewhere else. So we moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. So that was quite a culture shock. And I lived there through like from sixth grade on through high school, and then went to school in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, at a school there called Wright State University. And then from there, I moved out to LA to make my way and try to be an actor, and stayed there till all of this happened. And then 10 years ago, we moved to Vegas. So
Hmm.
that's the wheres of all of it. Yeah, so I have an eclectic background, moving around a lot. Never having close friends for more than a span of like 2 years. So I was the perennial new kid on the block everywhere, because my life was kind of a dry erase board. It was like being an army or military kid, but without my mom actually being in the military. So
What was it that made you have to constantly move around?
just I, sometimes you just move to a new neighborhood in Chicago, and that means you never see the kids that you were in third grade with again, and then you move to New Mexico, or what have you, and then you go to a school for a year, and then you go to a different school, you meet people, and then you then go to a totally different distance. So you just don't know your whole. I say that my third year of high school was the first time I really knew anyone for 3 years. That was like the longest relationship started right then, when I was 16.
How would you describe yourself as a kid?
I was pretty precocious and outgoing. I was into drama since I was like 8 years old. So I did all the high school plays and musicals, and I liked attention. I was an only child and had moved around a lot. So I didn't have any lifelong friends growing up. So I think I developed. You have that option when you move around a lot and you don't have a lot of friends and you're only child. Your option is to either become super outgoing and maybe develop a sense of humor, so to get people to like you because you're the stranger, or you become a serial killer. And I chose to do both, but I really shouldn't talk about that part of my life. No, but it's just that was how I coped. If the new guy, if you're funny, then people sort of accept you in because you're making them laugh. And I didn't instinctively like have that as a conscious battle plan, but that was the way I got people to like me.
I read somewhere that you described yourself sort of as a class clown. Would you say that that was part of your trying to always reestablish yourself with peers?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I was the guy that would dress up in goofy clothes when I was in high school. I had a rubber chicken. I would like try to lead cheers in the stands at football game. I was, yeah. And then I was also in all the drama plays and doing that. So yes, I liked attention because I had craved attention my entire life, and I did not have any brothers or sisters. So it was kind of like,
Was acting and show business sort of what you projected yourself to do with your whole life, or did you have any other dreams and aspirations?
that was the big one. I mean, when I was 8 years old, I told my mom, we were living in the Chicago area, that I wanted to be an actor, and she was like, "Oh, well, all right." Where does that come from? I think it came from watching TV and comedy all my childhood, left in front of the television. So she enrolled me in a summer theater program where they put on plays in the summer, kids from the Chicago area, and I did it and sort of got bitten by the bug and never stopped doing it all the way through my life, and got my BFA in acting at a theater in Ohio, and so naturally transitioned, went out with nothing but my Carmen Gia full of stuff to Los Angeles, and never turned back. And the dominoes fell in some good ways for me, and kind of got to pay my bills as an actor. And then obviously the last 30 years as a improviser for my whole life. So I consider myself super fortunate to actually have been not working as anything else but a performer for over 30 years. So it's so rare that I never look at it and take that fortune for granted ever. the good fortune of it.
I think most drama kids have that one show that really sparks something in them that makes them think, oh, yeah, this is something I want to do. Did you have any of that for you? Was there a show that was like your go-to show that really reemphasized how much you wanted to be an actor?
I think it was even earlier than when I started at 8. I was in a first grade, it might have even been before, preschool production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and I was Snoopy, and all I had to do was lay on the top of the doghouse, and I was up there trying to get attention and dancing, and not dancing, but moving around, laying on my back, but moving around, and somehow the way that thing was constructed, it was like a loose board that I was on the top, and I was slowly working myself off the board. The board was coming off, and I guess the grown stagehand had to like come on and push it back on to keep it from crashing. And apparently I sort of fell off the back and was looking at the audience like this. And apparently that brought the house down. So I think that was my first true full house hysterical laughter. And ever since then, I've been chasing that high, making people laugh. So that was my seminal launch into, wow, making people laugh is a pleasurable experience.
How did you discover the art of improv?
Well, I was in acting in school. So, we did a little bit of improv and workshop stuff, but nothing that was just comedic in nature, or performative. It was a tool. But then a group of my friends and I in college started a sketch comedy group, sort of like a poor man's Second City, where we wrote sketches and performed in them. There were like 10 of us, and we had probably like 50 sketches, just a ridiculous amount of sketches that we had written that were all basically like SNL and more like SNL because none of us had really been to Chicago to see a live Second City. I'm just after the fact comparing it to a Second City review. And we used a lot of improv to, write and come up and expand those sketches. So that was my first practical use of it, doing it for the purpose of comedy. But I was working in TV production when I first moved out behind the scenes to Los Angeles, basically a glorified runner, script delivery person, getting lunch thing. And I did that for like 2 years on different shows, award shows and TV shows. And someone I was working with, he was in the mid-level production of one of these programs, was a friend of mine, and he said, you should come to my improv class that I'm taking. It's a workshop, and I think you would love it and be really good at it. So I went, and the group was called Go for Broke, and a guy named Mike Abdullah, he went by Mike Oscar at the time, was teaching the class. And I sort of went to that class and started doing it, and it was like the heavens opened up, and someone had handed me the musical instrument that I was supposed to become a virtuoso on. I did air quotes there for people at home wondering why I called myself a virtuoso. Just a horribly scrambled metaphor, but basically, and when that instrument is handed to you and it's improv, basically the heavens have handed you like an oboe, a very obscure, not necessarily practical instrument that's ever going to lead to anything. But that was it. I was like, oh, this is, I know how to do this. So I didn't even really have to learn it. It was just like someone showed me what the structure is, and so retrospectively, I basically realized that my entire life talking with my friends and trying to make them laugh conversationally in everything that was going on in a moment in the day, whatever, I was thinking as an improviser. I was absorbing all of what was going on in our conversations and saying funny things about it germane to the content. So I had been performing as an improviser for my friends basically my entire life. I wasn't just reading joke books and then reciting funny jokes back to people. I was listening to what we were all talking about and then crafting funny stuff that was germane to that and always made my friends laugh. So I had sort of tapped into that thought process early on. And only when I took an improv class was it sort of given a name and a structure, and that this is actually a way of performing comedy. So it took me zero time to adapt to that process. It was kind of like, I was throwing a rock in my backyard in my hand, spinning around doing that. And then someone said, here, try the discus. And then and I picked it up. I was like, oh, I've been doing this in my backyard forever. And I threw it. And it's like, I set a record. Oh, wow. People do this normally? I was just doing this in my backyard. So yeah, so I just took to it, and we started doing shows out at the Laugh Factory. And then I got into a group, Theater Sports, which I'm sure you know, Theater Sports and Comedy Sports and Keith Johnstone and all that. So I did LA Theater Sports out in LA and taught classes there and was in the main performing group. Then we did shows, 3 times a week. And then Second City moved out to Los Angeles in the 90s, and they were doing a sort of the main show. And the main show had Richard Kind, Ryan Stiles, Robin Duke, Chris Barnes, a couple other people in it. And I was in the workshops, and then they had auditions for the touring company. So the touring company, we started performing on Sunday nights, doing best of stuff from the whole catalog of Second City sketches. And Ryan was in the show, and I became his understudy. So I was Ryan Stiles' understudy in the show, and I went in for him in a couple of shows, like 1 or 2 nights when he was working or got sick or whatever. And so not only was that weird, and that was my connection and link to how I got on Whose Line. But so that's where I first started working with Ryan and understudying for him. And then when Whose Line came to Los Angeles one time to audition people for the show, Ryan said, "The producers are coming. You should go try out. You'd probably get on the show." And so I auditioned, and it was like a horrible chorus line thing where me and every friend of mine that I ever knew that was in improv in the Second City out there and in Theater Sports and all that, we all tried out. And it was just like, "Thank you, everybody. You 5 can leave." And then it was down to this, and it was down to this. And at the end of the day, I ended up being the only person from the whole LA audition that got on the show. But the other strange thing, going back to our best of show that we were doing a retrospective of sketches, I was doing sketches that Colin wrote, like in really? The live in our touring show. The guy that I now have been touring with for 22 years, I was doing sketches that he and Ryan had written together, or that he and Ryan and Mike Myers had been in, and it's so crazy how small that world is. And so I got on the British version and did 3 seasons of the British version, and then the Drew version started on ABC and did those. And all the main rotational guys from the show, like I had known from before I even did the show. I had worked with Greg. He was a Bay Area Theater Sports alum. He did Theater Sports improv, but as well as his stand-up. And so I had played with him a bunch of times. I played with Wayne and Jonathan in Florida because they were in SAC Theater out there. I don't know if SAC even exists out there anymore, but it was basically sort of its
SAC is still there.
Yeah. It was sort of a theater sports group, plus it was its own thing. So I had worked with both of them long before I had gotten on Whose Line, and even longer before Wayne got on Whose Line. And Ryan, I had been jamming with in LA, and Colin and Ryan are both Theater Sports alumni. They both did Theater Sports, as did Greg, as did Jonathan and Wayne, and so did I. And Jeff Davis, who's been on the CW version, he's a Comedy Sports guy. And Chip, who I also knew from the Groundlings. So it's a very... I think the thing to infer there is if you have a good theater sports or comedy sports background, it is like the best training ground for being on a live improv network show where you gotta kind of keep it clean, because that sort of trained you to be cleaner in your improv for the network. So I knew all of them long before I'd ever even gotten on the show. My paths had crossed with them.
It is amazing how small the improv world really is, as you described. And, when we watch you performing with all the others, Ryan and Colin and Wayne and all of them, you definitely see a sense of camaraderie between everyone. Would you say that that's something that definitely helped make the show what it is? The fact that all of you guys, when you play together, you had such a great bond and connection with each other?
I think it's a combination of having a good bond with people, and the fact for me, especially having actually done live shows with them that weren't, some of them hadn't worked with each other. I mean, Ryan and Colin had worked together for years, and with Greg as well. But I think it's the combination of that and sort of similar backgrounds and disciplines to the improv we grew up learning. The fact that we all had done theater sports is kind of like we all had the same martial arts training. We all were, karate black belts. So we all knew karate. So that skill we had in common, because some people sort of do improv and they might have just done it with a renegade group out of college, but they didn't have a more structured, almost self-taught. And so we had all been sort of taught the same approach, and we had all taught it as well going on. So I think you don't need a similar background, but it doesn't hurt to sort of have a similar approach, especially since none of us were like doing filthy body stuff, because we had all grown up in a theater sports background, which kind of shunned you going for salacious and dirty stuff.
When we see you performing, it definitely looks like it's just coming to you naturally. And because you described yourself as always trying to be a class clown growing up, it seems like you've always been sort of like a naturally funny person. Do you think being naturally funny has been a great tool that has helped you become a great improviser? Or do you think that really doesn't matter so much?
No, I think you do have to be sort of naturally funny. And being naturally funny is someone who can access all the thoughts in their brain quickly and successfully to say something funny. I mean, it's like, I don't mean like, lampshade on the head. I'm naturally funny. I'm wacky, blah, 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 blah. And I'm willing to make a complete idiot out of myself, which I also am based on the results of watching decades of Whose Line. But if you're sort of a shy person, or like, there's some people that are writers and they can write the funniest thing in the world, but it has to be, ruminated on, and they craft the funny. You need to be able to think funny very successfully and consistently all the time to be a really good improviser that is going to perform it on stage.
Do you think that's something that can be taught?
I think the structure can be taught, but the innate inner funny of you as a person, whether it's a weird wry sense of humor or an overt sense of humor, or I tend to be kind of a combination of goofy and very verbose. I do a lot of wordplay stuff. So it's like I go back and forth between saying something very sort of obscure, weird reference and sort of, I'll put quotes, intelligent. And then I go to the other direction where I then do stuff that's completely stupid and goofy. So I don't sort of stay in just one lane. I like the dichotomy of having a good, really great vocabulary where I can do masterful Shakespearean wordplay and then just do something completely stupid. And if you know what I mean, and potty humor, because I have the emotional makeup of a 10-year-old boy. But yes, because I worked with so many people in theater sports, and some of them were good at being fast as an improviser to keep an improv conversation going, but they weren't necessarily saying a lot of funny stuff. Sometimes there's a lot of people in a group that are they're not the like anchor funny people. They're the people that keep a conversation going, and they, answer and ask questions. They're almost like a straight person. And then there's some groups that you have two people that are both super funny, and it's just kind of going back and forth, like every single line up, going up the scene is sort of top this, funny, 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 funny. But there are a lot of, gung ho, hands on hips people that are in a group that may not be like, oh my God, if you put them and another person just like them in the scene together without one of the anchor funny people, they're not going to kill it, even though they're in a group that consistently kills.
You mentioned something that I'm kind of interested in, the fact that because you did so much time with comedy sports and then transitioning into Whose Line, it kind of forces you to keep it clean. Do you like staying in the clean route, or do you often also enjoy going the dark route, if you will?
Oh, I don't care. I'm such a juvenile delinquent in my brain that yes, I go for silly, stupid, poopy, fart humor. as a as just a for the shock value. It's not like, oh, I make the entire thing about that, but I never avoid dipping into that if something funny comes to me based on what's going on. I mean, come on, you're doing a sound effects scene and someone makes a fart sound, you have to go there, and I will go there. And if there's room to go a little further with that and make that now embarrass them into going farther in, I will take that opportunity. So yes, nothing is beneath me, nothing is above me. It's just all around me.
Do you find it difficult to always keep it clean all the time?
No, actually, no. We tend to not to go to. We never go into like super sexist things or overtly sexual. And because there's two guys on stage when I'm doing shows with Colin, it's not like one of us is going to be playing a woman and we're doing a chat up scene. We generally are two cohorts that are working on something together or trying to solve a crisis or this or that. So yeah, we very rarely will just do something salacious because we're panicking, like so many stand-ups do, where like they might start off with their A material, and when that's not working for the crowd, then they start doing super blue and they start swearing a lot and go for the shock value. We don't pander in that way because we don't need to. We have both had, God, I mean, probably between us, we have upwards of 85 years of actual on stage improv performing experience, you know, between us. We're not worried that we're not going to come up with something. So we don't have default groove things that we lean on because we don't know what to do with something. We trust each other. We generally an improviser might have four ideas and he just chooses one when someone asks him a question. I tend to. I'm not like sitting there going, I don't have an answer. I hope I find one. It's like my intellectual comedy brain goes, okay, there's a lot of options I could be doing here. And this is all being microprocessed instantaneously. Sort of one answer is the straight answer. One answer is like the complete opposite answer. One answer is like the shocking, angry answer. And one answer is an obscure answer. And my brain kind of grabs instinctively the one I think is going to be the funniest response to this as I'm speaking. And that choice is different every single time. And it might be filtered through whatever character I currently am in or whatever situation we are currently in. If my character is stressed and terrified of something, his realm of reference for reacting to the situation might be, well, it won't be consistent, but it might be more consistently down this vein of panicked and angry and this and that, where, so I'm filtering everything through that when I go. So it's never about, oh, I've always got dirty jokes in my back pocket or salacious. Yeah.
Well, Whose Line Is It Anyway is obviously not your first TV experience, and I'm going to mention a name right now, and I don't think a lot of people will know this name, but I'm sure you will, and that's the name Ned Barron. Does that name ring a bell?
Yes, of course. You're referring to my character on LA Law. I did six
Yes.
episodes of LA Law. That was my first professional acting gig on planet Earth.
Really?
Yes, yes. I'd been auditioning. I'd been in LA. I'd done like maybe a commercial here or there, one of those obscure late night commercials, like "Hey, buy this record." But yeah, that was my first professional acting job, and what a job it was! Like to get six episodes on LA Law. And I'm not known for drama. And after you see my performances on that show, you'll agree. And that was my first and last dramatic role in acting anywhere. I'm a very funny performer. I'm not a great dramatic actor by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not beating myself up. I just know where my bread is buttered. But yeah, I did six episodes, and the coolest thing was I got one of those director's chairs things that goes on the back of the chair. On one side it said
Yeah.
LA, and on the other side it said Brad Sherwood. Like that was the start of my showbiz career. Like how cool is that? And I had watched that show when I was in college. I was in the sixth season, so I had seen it in college and I had seen it in high school. And it was like the big drama. Today I don't know what that would be like because there's so many dramas. But yeah, it would be like getting on Law and Order, if that's even on anymore. I don't know. So, but yeah, that was cool.
Ned Barron, I have to say, from what I saw, is such an odd character because he's a nanny that this couple hires.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but it turns out Ned Barron is in love with the wife and tries to hit on her.
Yeah.
And as I'm watching you, I can't help but feel like there's something creepy about this guy. And then as it progressed, you could kind of see, oh yeah, okay, that's why he's kind of creepy. What was the experience like? I know you don't think of yourself as a drama guy, but what was the experience like of creating that character and making that character who he was?
Well, I mean, I was just nervous beyond recognition to be on the set of the biggest drama in show business at the time with actors that I had watched all this time, and it's literally my first acting gig. So I was just crapping myself the entire time. That I had no character real development. It was just extension of me as a young 20-something guy who had to be nice and approachable enough for them to hire me as a nanny. They fired their first nanny because it was a girl and they came home and she was having sex with her boyfriend on the couch. So I was their second choice. That's how they justified me, because their first choice was having sex. My character is this sort of naive young guy that just finds Jill Eikenberry, the actress's character, alluring. So it wasn't so much creepy. It was a creepy plot line. So I think that the writers and producers were creepy. I was just a young guy that fell for a slightly older woman that he was in a house with, and I definitely had almost zero creepy vibes. I have barely human vibes in that, because I was just hoping I didn't forget my lines. I was so out over my skis. But for me, the subplot there was that those two actors, Jill Eikenberry and Michael Tucker, were married in real life. So my first day on the set, and they already knew basically what the plot line was going to be of my arc, didn't know how long it was going to be or whatever. I'm in the makeup trailer getting made up, and they come in and they're getting made up. They say hello to me, and then they are talking to producers while they're in the makeup chair about how dumb they think this whole plot line is. Basically that her character would never want anything to do with this young guy because their characters, based on themselves, are so in love. So it was more of like a threat to their actual marriage, which this TV relationship was an extension of. How dare the writers and producers want such a salacious subplot for their characters? Leave that to the other Corbin Burnsons and Susan Days of the world that are the younger, hipper, smoldering characters. So they were literally talking the producers out of my job the moment I got there to be in the makeup chair. Talk about a friggin' nightmare. I was like, well, my days are numbered, So luckily this plot point, my plot arc ended up being 6 episodes, which was basically 1 or 2 scenes in 6 episodes that were spread out over the season. But I knew I was never going to become a recurring character because they were politicking against me. I was lucky to not have been written off in 2 episodes based on A, my performance, and B, on the fact that the 2 stars of the show were actively campaigning to kill my character's plot line from day one. So that was my first show business glamorous survival story.
Do you think you would ever do a dramatic piece like that again, or do you feel like you are just dead set on sticking with comedy?
Oh, absolutely. I would do like a friggin' Coen Brothers psycho, lone gunman type thing. Quentin Tarantino's notorious and famous for hiring comedic performers to be in his gritty, super disturbing, ultra dark murder plots. So yeah, I would do something like that in a heartbeat. Yes, I just don't think I would be able to carry like a super dramatic romantic thing. But yes, I think I could play dark, sinister cowboys, assassins, hitmen. Yeah, I could chase Liam Neeson around a European country with a silencer on my gun. That would be a really good role for me. I would love that. Just a sort of like slightly quirky, dark. He's got a weird tick and all the music and score of the movie imbues my character with a lot more menace than generally anyone who knows me in person. They would all be laughing. But yes, I would love to be in a weird, completely counter to my personality thing.
One of your other television experiences was on the sketch comedy show, The Newz.
Yes.
How did that show come about, and how did you manage to get on that show, and what was your experience like being on The Newz?
It was so creative. That was one of my favorite shows I ever worked on because I was writing sketches and performing sketches, and it had never been done before. It was a sketch show that had a week, 6 episodes a week of original programming, half hour, and then so we would go down to Florida for 3 weeks and shoot basically 27 shows, and then we'd come back and write again, and then we'd go back down there 3 weeks later and shoot 3 more weeks of shows. So that no one had ever produced that much original content of a sketch comedy show, and it was so great. And it was produced by Columbia TriStar, and they loved it. And then two of the producers that were the upper producers, the money guys out of your state, Florida, uh, basically Columbia TriStar loved the show so much they wanted to throw more money at it and renew it. And we'd only done 60 something episodes at that point, and they couldn't account for the money. They had been siphoning off money from this project, not knowing that it was going to get picked up and become a success. That they'd end up making more money retrospectively off of a success, and there we were. And so they shut it down and said, nope, all done. And they just took all of our episodes, this genius stuff, put it in a vault. And so it never got syndicated or stripped out for residuals or anything. And it was just a one and done. So they basically snatched defeat from the jaws of victory on that show. So yes, you've asked about two of the soul crushing like failures of my career where the stars were actively campaigning against me to stay on the show. And then this next show, we were creating an awesome, super successful kind of right. I think we came out right around the time of or right before In Living Color, and just holy crap, what a great show. And then like, no, the producers got greedy and torpedoed the entire thing. It was so sad. Yeah.
Well, let me apologize for bringing you down that sad memory lane.
Yeah. But it's fascinating, though. It's like little weird stories where you go, oh my God, this is a guaranteed success. And then no. I'm sure you'll find some more from your search through my IMDb page.
Well, I think everyone kind of has that, I mean, I'm
Oh,
sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Wayne and Ryan and Colin and Jonathan, I mean, everybody that you see has sort of gone through those experiences where they have something great happening and then it just goes away in an instant. And I think that's a great thing to hear because a lot of people just assume, oh, Brad Sherwood, he immediately became a success. And it's not always like that. Do you think it's good for people to know that there are failures that lead to success?
Oh my God! In the world of acting and performing, and there's for every one job you get, you audition for 100 jobs that you didn't get. There's not a higher rejection rate, even for people that are super successful. Once you get super successful as like a movie person, then people are sending you scripts and you just choose which ones you kind of want to do. And you hope that one or two people more famous than you didn't take the job, so there's still a hierarchy when you're the Scarlett Johanssons of the world or the Ryan Goslings. But once they've broken through, then they don't really have to worry. They can pick and choose. But everybody else is always hustling, and you never know how long a job is going to last. So you've got a gig and you're like, oh my God, this is great. And it could be The Good Wife and it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes, or it can be a great show that lasted one season. And then you got to start over. You got to start knocking on doors and auditioning. And so you if you're good, if you're smart, you save your money because the thing that seems like a sure thing will only last so long. And then you are back to being a famous unemployed actor. I'm not calling myself famous, but I'm calling the one season. And there was a show called Pushing Daisies on ABC. And I can't remember. It's not Paul Dano who was the star of it, but Kristen Chenoweth was on it. And the other actress in it also ended up doing a show called Marcella. All three of them amazing. And I think there was only 1 or 2 seasons of that show. And I could not believe it did not go on forever, because it was just such a funny, dark comedy, and it had like musical songs in it. It was hilarious, shot amazingly, but it didn't really catch on and take off. And I would have bet huge money on that show going on for a long time. And all three of them went on to other great stuff. But yeah, they would have thought, this is it. I'm on an ABC, amazing 1 hour dark whodunit kind of comedy.
So let me transition back to Whose Line Is It Anyway, mainly because I don't want to make you sad anymore. But
that show comes with its own heartbreak and sadnesses.
How much of an influence did you and the rest of the cast have as far as what was going to be done on that show?
Well, I mean, we were always they were always open to our suggestions of games, a scene that we had done in our past that might work. I actually, when I was teaching in theater sports back in the day, I came up with a game called New Choice. And that's what most people call it. Some people call it hesitation or should have said or whatever. But I came up with that as a teaching tool, as a really good game to teach improvisers not to have the panic of there's only one right thing to say. So when you run them through a series of new choices, they say their first thing, and then you go new choice, and then they have to say something else, and then you say new choice again and again, and it starts to reinforce in your brain. Oh my God, there's a line of ideas in my brain. That was the first one. Now I had to throw that away, and then something else pops in, and it kind of, I think, gives a certain amount of comfort to someone that you're not looking for the one right thing to say. There are 100 things you could say there, and your job is to make them right after you've said them with the help of your partner. And so that I got that game on the show. And then Colin and I did an old theater sports game in one of our Just for Laugh Montreal shows, where it was a sideways scene. We're laying on the floor and doing a sideways scene with a camera shooting from above. And that ended up getting on Whose Line for a couple of episodes as well. So, yeah, never got any extra residuals for it, but
I feel extremely honored to be talking to the originator of New Choice. So I bow to you, because that's one of my favorite games. I love watching it and I love playing it.
That is, besides just having been, on the sort of Mount Rushmore improv TV show that sort of brought true improv awareness to a whole generation of people that didn't know it was even a comedy art form. Yes, New Choice was my contribution to the pantheon of games in the world.
Many people in the world have discovered improv thanks to Whose Line Is It Anyway? And thanks to watching you and Ryan and Colin and everyone else. For you, how does it feel to know that you were a part of something that really opened up improv to everyone more than it ever has before?
I feel crazy lucky to have been one of the sort of the main 6 that was on the Drew Carey, the last few seasons of the British version, and then all of the seasons of the Drew Carey version. I feel so fortunate, because literally, if it weren't for that show, obviously no one would have known as much about improv. But that is why Colin and I can tour in theaters all over the country and, sell tons of tickets. And, he and I have made more money performing live improv on our tour on the road than we ever made doing the TV show. I mean, the money on the TV shows. And we didn't get residuals, even though we were basically writing it and performing it, because it fell under the auspice for them, genius ploy as a game show. Game shows don't get residuals for the performers.
I didn't know that.
What a screw job for us. Yeah, talk about another heartbreak. We were on 8 seasons of network half-hour primetime comedy on ABC. And the show right after us, which was a sitcom, those people continue to make money in perpetuity off of that show. Whereas we, genius enough to create all of the spoken dialogue of this show for a half hour on primetime network, were clumped into a game show category so that they did not have to pay residuals. So take that. Every one of us got screwed in that way. So being able to tour with it and and barter off of the notoriety of Whose Line was sort of the golden gift we were handed afterwards. We could take our talents and market them post Whose Line to have a successful money earning tour. That was the karmic parting gift for not ever having gotten a single dollar in residuals.
Other than obviously the location and the host, did you notice any differences between performing Whose Line in the British version and Whose Line in the ABC American version?
Not really. The hosts had different personalities, and I was the closest with Drew. Clive, who I've worked with a bunch of times even since then, because we've gone to the West End in London and done live versions of Whose Line with some assemblage of the casts. But the whole production company, the whole cast, other than the host, and the set and the musical people that we've been working with since the last 4 seasons of Whose Line were exactly the same. We're singing with Laura Hall and Linda Taylor. I'm on stage with Ryan, Colin, and Wayne, which is exactly the same, even when it moved over to CW. So for us on stage, there was zero difference except for the host sitting in the chair.
Well, I'm curious, what about the audience? Do you think that there's a different audience between the American version and the British version?
I mean, maybe at a certain point, but the British version, who loved the show in the last 3 seasons, and there were no British people in the cast other than Clive being the host. So their sensibilities liked us, and the producers liked us. So the show became more of an American Canadian sensibility, comic wise, than it had been in the earlier days when there were the Hugh Laurie's and the Stephen Fry's on the show doing it. So back then it was a little more pithy and snarky and literary references. Like they would line up and it would be 4 playwrights and a poet of British literature, and they were nailing it and kicking it out of the park. But by the time it had transitioned to an all American / Canadian cast, we're doing goofy things and sticking pies in each other's faces, and it became more broad, but it didn't become less funny. It's just that the sensibility became more goofy and higher stakes, and we were performers that were willing to maybe go through a broader range of cerebral stuff all the way down to the goofy physical stuff that they never really tapped the British improvisers for. So it's sort of it evolved into what it was, and I think a lot of the British people would say that it devolved into what it was. But that's just your take on, some people want super erudite improv, and other people are like me that are willing to do whatever to make people laugh.
Based on your experience, do you notice any differences between performing improv live on stage and performing improv for TV?
Well, because doing it on Whose Line, we had about a 300 plus live audience there, as close to the stage as possible. We had still all the timing and energy of a live crowd. So in that sense, there was no difference. The biggest difference was that the improv scenes that we were doing on the show had to be compacted down into 3-minute to 5-minute scenes because they needed to take commercial breaks, and they needed to dice this show up into digestible segments that were in between commercials. So nothing got developed into big, wild, and wacky stuff like in our live show and in all the live cast of Whose Line going out. Something is 15, 20-minute goofy scene, or lots more is happening because you don't have to go, okay, we'll be right back. So that would be the biggest difference, not the audiences or the hosts. The biggest differences are in, you can luxuriate in mayhem longer, telling the story or getting into trouble in the live version that doesn't have cameras and commercials.
So I've always wanted to ask this. Can you sort of walk me through what a typical day of shooting an episode of Whose Line is?
Yes. Basically, we would get there early and we would do what's called a tops and bottoms. They would hand us a sheet and it said the list of games. There'd be like 25 games. They would shoot 25 games with the hopes of getting 5 to 7 for one episode. If they got a bunch more, then they would edit it into 3 shows. My very first show in the British version went so well that everything worked, and they edited it into 4 shows. So I got paid for 4 shows for one taping. And how they would do that is after they would look, and they would, during the taping, they would like write checks and stars next to something. If it got enough stars that this one is good enough to be in the show, then they'd look at that list and they go, well, we got 23 games. That's enough for, say, 7 shows, or 3 shows of 7 games. Then they would have the host shoot 2 more. Hi, welcome to Whose Line? Come on down, blah, blah, blah. And then instead of saying, we're going to start the show with sound effects, they would say, we're going to start the show with scenes from a hat, blah, blah, blah. So they would just do those, and then they would do 3 good nights out of whatever the last game was. So they might do a hoedown, and they might end with another blah, blah, blah. So that they would just splice it up into a way that they could modularly then in post edit 3 to 4 episodes.
One thing that was very interesting about Whose Line is every now and then they'd have a celebrity special guest come on to play a game or two. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like? And I ask because one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of the celebrity guests that you would get tend to be not so in tune with improv. So what was it like to be in a game with someone who's a celebrity that is not so improv inclined? What was that experience like for you and the rest of the players?
Well, the CW version did that almost every episode. They would bring on 1 or 2 celebrities. And they all happened to be mostly celebrities that were on CW shows. So I think you can see where they were like, hey, let's use Whose Line as a commercial for all of our other programming to get the people that watch Arrow, which is aged down considerably from our general audience that's watching Whose Line, as a way of drawing in those fans of Arrow to see at least one episode of Whose Line to get them excited about that. No one on the show was really thrilled about that, either having to sing a song to so-and-so or Carmen Electra or whoever. There were a few exceptions, though, where it was amazing, like when Richard Simmons did it on the Drew Carey version. And that's like still one of the funniest sketches that Colin ever did on the show. Where they were using him as human props. And it was just hysterical. He played the jet ski and blah, blah, blah. So I would say there were several times when it worked really great. Like one time I was with Kathy Lee Gifford on the show, and she was hysterical. She was like grinding and gyrating and dancing on me. And then in the arms through scene where Colin and Ryan are making stuff, she came back in for that, and then got her hands covered in peanut butter and jelly and went over to me. And I was sitting in the back and stuffed her hands in my mouth because she was sort of keeping the through line of her being sexually attracted to me. So those moments pay huge dividends, but that's the rare occasion. I would say more time than not, it was just kind of this weird obligatory thing where we had to somehow do a scene with or about that stunt casting person, instead of it being like, oh, why don't we just let these guys do what they do? But everybody's always trying to reinvent the wheel just a little bit. What can we do different that we didn't used to do, and maybe bring more viewers in?
I think a lot of us have some pieces that we really love to do, and at the same time, we also have some games that we absolutely hate doing. Were there any games that you particularly loved, and were there any games on Whose Line that you particularly hated?
I always liked anything singing and music. To me, the hardest type of improv is music, song improv. If you're doing a certain style where you're lampooning someone like, Bruce Springsteen or Mick Jagger or whatever, you're having to do an impression. You're also having to make lyrics up based on the title, and you're having to do it convincingly in the genre. If you're not doing a impersonation of a specific person, and you have to make it rhyme. So that's like, how many plates is your brain spinning intellectually when you're doing that? More than in any other scene. In any other scene, you're just listening to someone talk to you and then coming up hopefully with a funny thing. And yes, there are verbal games like New Choice where they try and trap you and get you into the dark part of your brain saying something weird and doesn't make any sense, and that's when it gets good. Or any verbal restriction games are a little bit more of a challenge. But that one to me is my favorite. My least favorite game always has been Scene in Reverse. That one just is like if you get lost in the weeds, it's like that scene is always like it hardly ever flows so seamlessly. There's always almost like a time delay, like when you're doing an interview, that I don't think is compelling to the audience. And the story that is told by doing it in reverse is never amazing. It's just kind of like the audience leaves with that one line was clever because it made sense with what just came before it. But it's never like, oh, this is going to be an amazing scene. It's literally, you're just watching the smoke come out of everybody's ears, and it never ascends to huge heights of chaos, generally. So I think that one's a little laborious.
Whose Line is one of those shows where it tends to come and then it tends to go away and then it manages to find its way back. And it found its way back on the CW with Aisha Tyler as the host. And now it's kind of gone away. Do you see Whose Line possibly making another return in the future?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I don't think it would necessarily be with the entire. Their dream would be, how do we get the original main guys to want to and agree to do it, because they've done it for so long, and they're never compensated financially as well as they should be. That it's like, like every one of us that does it gets paid better to go out on the road and do it in front of an audience. So I think if everybody had been paid residuals long ago, I think they would have all had more of a love for the actual performing of the show.
If there were a new version of Whose Line to come out, who would you want to pick as the host?
Well, I had worked with Aisha in comedy clubs at the Laugh Factory. She used to host Sunday nights, and for 8 years I was with the regular Sunday night improv group at the Laugh Factory. We were a conglomeration of theater sports varsity members, and our group was called Wrought Irony. That's right, Wrought Irony. And we played there literally every Sunday night, did like a 30-minute, 40-minute set for 8 years. And she used to host that night sometimes. And so I had known her. So she's great. And I love Clive because he's super dry. But I'm actually closest friends with Drew of the three of them. And there's something about when Drew just started laughing and giggling at the desk over what there's no better way to keep the audience laughing than to cut away to Drew, who's like putting his head down and giggling like a kid. And so my greatest joy on doing the show was the ABC version, when I could make Drew just completely lose it. That was, to me, the height of improv success for me. It was to get my buddy and the host and big star of the show just losing it.
Well, now that brings us to today. We've seen you doing a lot more touring, and you mentioned how you've been touring with Colin a lot. Where did the idea come from for you and Colin to do a touring show together?
Well, we had been doing live shows with the whole gang. It was the Drew Carey All-Stars, and we would perform in Vegas. We do a weekend run in Vegas, Super Bowl weekend every year, and we did that for like 7-8 years. But it was all of us from the show, and then a couple of ancillary people that were also on the Drew Carey show. So Kathy Kinney was in it for a while, Ian Gomez, who was a regular on Drew Carey Show, and then a couple other people, Sean Masterson, who was in the improv world and a Second City guy, and so on. So we would do the show with 10 people. And when 10 people are on stage in an improv show, you are sitting on the bench for over 2/3 of it. You're going to be maybe in two-person games, and then in like 2 group games, and then everybody's in freeze. So you spend a lot of time sitting and watching improv. And Drew took us out on a tour with that, and we got great money to just do what we love to do. But I started doing a 2-man show in comedy clubs around the country because I wanted to, monetize my skill set. And so I started doing that and created this really good 2-man show that worked in comedy clubs. And I was touring with a friend of mine at the time named Dave Bushnell. He got mad at me a while back for not ever mentioning him in these things. So now I'm saying his name, Dave Bushnell. He and I, we were in theater sports together, and we toured for 2 years. And I'd sort of cracked the code on just doing a 2-person show where you sort of have the audience in charge, but you don't have a third member that's your moderator and calling new choice and doing all that stuff. So, cracking the code is how do you do it with just 2 people? And then cracking the code is also how do you do a 1-man show? Those are the 2 big things that every person wants to figure out. So one of the years that we were doing the Vegas show, our wives were sitting together, and my wife turned to Colin's wife, Deb McGrath, very talented actress as well, comedic. She's also a Second City alumni, and she said, "Brad's doing comedy clubs in a 2-man improv show. Do you think Colin would be interested in going out on the road with Brad to do a 2-person show?" And she said, "I think absolutely. Let's go have drinks after this show and talk about it." So we talked about it. Then I went back to my agent who was booking me in comedy clubs and said, "Colin's interested." And we gave it a try. And we started in November of 2001, I think. And we've been doing it ever since. We've never stopped, basically.
I feel like from what I've seen from the touring show, it seems like you and Colin have given yourselves a lot more room to experiment with a lot more different types of things you could do. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. We were constantly innovating. Like, what games do we enjoy playing? How can we get as many audience members up on stage with us as possible? So we were innovating audience interactive stuff where they have input, kind of like they do in sound effects or in moving bodies, but in other scenes also giving us content in live time instead of the sentences on strips of paper and all that. That we wanted to sort of take that element and but bring audience members up on stage with us because it's kind of more immediate when they're finishing your sentences in live time instead of you just say, "Well, my dad always said to me,"
There is one piece that you and Colin have done, and it's a piece that I can't imagine any sane person would want to do. You did a scene blindfolded and surrounded by mousetraps.
Yes, that was in a book of theater sports games. Several decades of theater sports people coming up with game ideas, and every harebrained one that had ever been come up with was tediously put into a long list of games in, I think, alphabetical order, or maybe separated into like verbal games and justification games and all that stuff. And Mousetraps was in there. And I went from theater sports tournament to Amsterdam one time with 3 other friends of mine. So we were the U.S. team, and we were playing against Amsterdam, New Zealand, and a Danish team. So it was a 4-team tournament, and we did like several nights of shows. And I thought, let's do the mousetrap game. I've never done it. Let's give it a try. And so Dave Bushnell was the guy that went with me on that. And we did mousetraps. First time either of us had ever done it, never seen it. It was just in this book of, games, the Rosetta Stone of games for theater sports. And we bought a bunch of mousetraps at the hardware store. But we had to customize them because in Amsterdam, maybe in all of Europe, their mousetraps, the device that closes down on the mouse, in addition to the little motion thing, the board that it closes on the mouse has a nail in it sticking up.
Oh,
Slams and impales and holds the mouse there even better than just the mechanism. So we had to get like hammers and pull out all of the nails because it's bad enough to step on the mechanism and cut your toes and then have them slam on your toenails. That's enough pain, but we didn't want to have that. So we tried it that night and it friggin' killed. And we're both blindfolded. We can't see where we're going and trying to do this game. And it worked. So I just had that in the back of my mind, like, oh. And for years, probably 3 or 4 years, we ended our show with mousetraps every night. And then we innovated. We hung mousetraps from a fly rail in the theater. So they were all hanging down at face level and at belly level and at crotch level, randomly above the playing area that also had mouse traps. We even innovated that game even more. So, but then we got really tired of playing it because we had done it for so long that people that had come to see the show, it just didn't feel like it was different enough every time, because it sort of ended, in us with hijinks, and Colin would take his goggles off. And so if some people had seen our show before, that bit, we knew he was going to do it, but it made the audience laugh hysterically. So you can't keep doing a bit that kind of ends the same for too long. So we sort of stopped doing that game. And we did not enjoy stepping on mousetraps anymore in our older ages.
I'm sure. Do you enjoy the touring process? Because I know touring can be a grueling thing at times, but do you enjoy being on the road so much?
I love touring. Being on the road is at times exhausting, and other times it's not exhausting, depending on where you're going and what your schedule is and how often you have to get up for a 5 a.m. flight or whatever. But being on the stage and performing for audiences, and we go back to a lot of places, and we still sell really well, and people keep coming back. It's the only show that you could literally go, if we did 2 shows in a row, you could go see both of them. And the content is probably 98% different in both shows. Are we going to play the same menu of games? Yes, but all the content, all the scenarios, and everything that we do in those games is going to be completely different. You go see a stand-up, you have to wait a year and a half till he comes up with another, 35 to 60 minutes of new material. Otherwise, you are literally seeing a verbatim monologue that he might throw 2 asides away, talking to the audience that are different. But content-wise, it's exactly the same. And he tried it out in maybe theater comedy clubs, and then if he's one of the established guys, he then can do it in theaters. And you go to see him, you have to wait till he comes up with new material. You can see us 2 shows back to back on the same night and get a different hour and a half to 2 hours of comedy content. So we have a good return crowd.
Is there anything that you haven't done yet that you would really like to try?
In what realm?
Well, just in show business, I'm thinking, but you could expand that to anything else if you want.
Well, yes, I mentioned it earlier. I would still like to be a crazy assassin in a Coen Brothers No Country for Old Men type movie. Super dark, hyper violent, slow paced, the quiet, lurking guy that is bloodthirsty. But other than that, I mean, I've got. We're still touring. We have no signs of slowing down. We've got a busy schedule this year, and we've already got stuff coming up in 2025. And it's both our favorite show. We both say that this particular show is our favorite expression of what we do. We both are obsessed with making people laugh. You're like vampires. Once you get the bug of making people laugh, you want and crave it all the time. And it's us on stage. That, going back to when Drew and the gang, we were with 10, the high point of this is we split it 2 ways. We don't even have a musical person that goes with us. So it's split between us, and we're both on stage for the entire length of the show. So you're never sitting on the back bench watching 3 other people play Jeopardy or whatever, it's just us.
That's so cool. Brad, I've had an amazing time with you, and I have one final question to ask you, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
What's the one piece of advice that has served you well that you'd want everyone else to hear?
As an improviser, do as much improv as you can. I always joke that I've still done more shows for free than I have done shows for pay, because back in those days, the first 8 years of my improv career, it was just like 5 shows a week for free in clubs and theaters and all that stuff. So you got to do it to become good at it. It's like a martial art. You have to practice it and get good at it so that you're ready for whatever is thrown at you. And as far as just advice in show business, there's going to be a lot more rejection than there is acceptance. So you have to be thick enough skinned to do that. And if you're going to go into improv, you've got to enjoy it when you're doing it for free. And it got me through the hard rejection time of just being an actor and looking for work, is that I had such a great outlet of performing doing stuff with Second City and Theater Sports and all the other outlets that I had when I was doing 4 or 5 shows of different styles a week. It fed my soul, because TV show business doesn't necessarily feed your soul. It's little spurts of working on a movie or a TV show and all that.
Amazing. Well, Brad, I can't thank you enough for being here. I appreciate this so much. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck for you and the rest of your career, my friend.
Thank you so much, and I wish you much success in, I know you also work in the improv field, and it's not easy, and I feel fortunate to be one of like 10 people that actually maybe totally pays their bills only as doing improv. I always joke that there are more paid astronauts than paid improvisers. So it's not lost on me how fortunate I am to do this. So I wish well to the whole new scores of generations of improvisers making their way in the world in search of making it as a living. So good luck to everybody, and have fun doing it.
Thank you so much, Brad.
My pleasure.
Wow, what an amazing conversation, and really great advice, too. Keep performing as much as you can. Whether you're getting paid for it or not, keep practicing, keep putting yourself out there. It'll only make you better and stronger. I would like to give a huge thank you to Mr. Brad Sherwood for being so generous with his time today. This was an absolute honor and pleasure. If you want to find out more about him and see what he's up to, visit his website, bradsherwood.com. You can also follow Brad on Twitter and Instagram. And you can watch all episodes of Whose Line Is It Anyway on Pluto TV, Sling TV, Max, Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, and Google Play, as well as new episodes on the CW network. Like I said, this was an honor for me, but I feel even more honored to have shared this moment with you, my friends. I hope you all remember to never give up on yourselves. Keep believing in you, and you'll be amazed at what happens. Be sure to rate and review and spread the word about the podcast. Thank you for joining me again here on Improv and Magic. I'm LD Madera, and I'll see you next time.